I'm Kelly Higgins-Devine. Retail turnover has risen for a second consecutive month, with figures from the Bureau of Statistics showing you've spent 0.3% more in April than March. That means we've thrown $19.3 billion at the economy in April. The annual inflation rate is at 1.5%. The figures come ahead of tomorrow's Reserve Bank meeting. Scott Driscoll is the National Executive Director of the Retailers Association. Scott, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Kelly.
Which segments of the retail sector are doing well?
Look, I think anything to do with probably supermarkets and grocery, they're certainly travelling very well against a backdrop of probably a decrease in the restaurant and catering side of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about those the smaller shops you see, the ones that are more independent, if you like, that aren't part of a big chain? Are we getting information back on how they're doing?
Look, we are. It doesn't necessarily translate that being part of a big chain is in line with doing well, because oftentimes those smaller retailers, the independent retailers, can move and change their product offering, their price structures, etc., in line with demand. Now, we've seen a really big shift in consumer sentiment and demand in retail. You can't look at retail as a whole. You've really got to break it down, as I've just mentioned. The food and grocery sector is doing very well. Other areas that are doing well, I think, particularly are fast food, for example. People are opting for cheaper, quicker, as opposed to the discretionary spend at the higher end of things.
Yeah, and yet, as you said, the restaurants aren't, doing it a bit tough at the moment.
They sure are. I think restaurants are probably one of the major areas that are hurting at the moment, along with probably discretionary electrical spend. People are certainly cutting back there. And you're seeing a lot of those electrical retailers being squeezed a lot right at the moment.
And yet I would have thought perhaps with the economic stimulus packages coming out that people might have been buying their plasmas or digital radios or whatever it is they were going to get.
Kelly, we've never really believed that the sort of short, sharp spike from the stimulus packages was really going to be the long-term answer. But if there was going to be some spending in that area as a result, I think it probably came in the one back in December, where people who were eligible got that first little spike of a cash splash, as it's being called at the moment. But I think following from there, people are relying... and this is where discretionary spend is probably coming into question a bit. People are really being emotional about the way they spend their money at the moment. When you've got politicians out there being quite negative about the outlook and talking things down, essentially, it does go through to the psyche and affects the way people will spend their money.
Yeah. What can be done about that? If the outlook isn't good, how then do you talk up an economy?
Well, that's the difficult question, Kelly, because as we've seen, in March things went up 2.2% overall in retail. We've seen another increase of 0.3% in April on the latest figures that have just been released. Queensland particularly, obviously they're national percentages, but Queensland particularly is strong. We've got, by comparison to New South Wales, for example, or even Victoria, we've got a much stronger retail sector. So I think what we need to do is look at the reality. Consumers need to sort of make their own assessments and put politics and political agendas aside and say, well, look, the sun does come up each morning. We still are in jobs. 93% plus of people that want jobs have got them. We've got the lowest mortgage rate since the 60s, more disposable income in most household budgets. And I've been to plenty of state treasury assessments, Kelly, and even the state treasury people are saying, look, household economies in this state are very, very solid fundamentally. So they need to look at it and be objective.
Do you get a sense about where things are at the moment?
I think, we've certainly seen a severe downturn in overall confidence and spending towards sort of October last year. September, October, we really started to see some concerning trends. And I think post-Christmas, we saw another record spend over the Christmas-New Year trade period, which defied all of the people that were out there preaching doom and gloom. I think what we're seeing now moving into the second half of this year, on the back of some pretty strong and positive things being talked about out of the US. They're starting to see some positive signs. The talk is China is going to start to get back on the bus of trade again soon. All of that sort of thing, even does creep through to the household psyche and gets through the radio and the news station. So I think we're heading in the right direction. People are starting to understand, look, there is a light at the end of this tunnel and it's not a train.
What do you think the Reserve will decide tomorrow?
Oh, look, I think they might keep things on hold. I talk on a sort of a regular basis with the Reserve about, prior to their figures being released, about the way retail's going nationally, and we've given them a pretty straight up and down picture, just as I've given you, that it's a mixed bag. But I just have the feeling that perhaps we won't see any movement tomorrow.
All right, Scott Driscoll, thank you very much.
Thanks, Kelly.
Scott Driscoll, the National Executive Director of the Retailers Association. So for the second consecutive month, retail turnover up. There was up 0.3% more in April than in March.